Mark, a barista struggling to make ends meet, often sees the same faces in the coffee shop. One cold morning, he sees a man shivering outside the door, clearly homeless. Feeling compassion, Mark quietly offers the man a cup of hot coffee, expecting nothing in return. Unbeknownst to him, his small act will set off a chain of events that will change his life forever. A few hours later, a group of men in suits enter the cafe, and their presence marks the beginning of an unexpected event in Mark's life journey. Hello everyone, welcome to Stories to Heal. Today I am happy to share a new story with you. Mark is a young barista who works hard at a corner coffee shop in the city, serving his loyal customers with a small smile. Every day, his life feels the same. Filling coffee orders, cleaning tables, and waiting the endless hours. Mark often wonders if anyone notices his tired eyes or who is really behind the counter. But one colder than usual morning, as he prepares a latte, his gaze falls on a different figure than usual. Outside the cafe window, a homeless man stood shivering in the cold, wearing an old jacket. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking as he tried to keep warm. Mark felt a deep compassion for him. He knew what it was like to be depressed and exhausted, even though he had never actually lived on the streets. Without thinking, Mark decided to give him a cup of hot coffee. He ignored the cafe's strict policy against giving away freebies. It just felt like the right thing to do. He walked through the cafe, approached the man, and handed him the cup without saying a word. The man looked up at him, his eyes full of surprise and gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse from the cold. Mark just nodded and gave a small smile, then went back into the cafe. It was just a cup of coffee for him. A small act, but it felt like the right thing to do. The day passed. The cafe was once again bustling with customers coming and going, and though Mark tried to concentrate on his work, his thoughts kept returning to the man. Would the coffee he gave him warm him up a bit? Would the man ever find shelter? Mark had no answers, and life went on as usual. But a few hours after the incident, something unexpected and very surprising happened. The cafe door suddenly made a noise as it opened, and a group of men dressed in neat black suits entered the cafe. Their presence immediately caught everyone's attention, standing out among the usual cafe patrons, most of whom wore casual clothes. The atmosphere of the cafe, which had been quiet and comfortable, suddenly became tense, and Mark felt an almost indescribable tension in the air. One of the men, the most prominent among them, with striking silver hair and a piercing stare, walked slowly toward the cashier. "You're Mark, right?" he asked in a calm but curious voice. Mark was surprised to hear this, his eyes widening for a moment before he slowly nodded. "Yes, I'm Mark. How can I help you?" he replied with an uneasy feeling in his heart. The man smiled faintly, but the smile that appeared on his face felt flat and insincere. "We want to talk to you about something very important." "It won't take long," he said, his deep voice full of meaning. Then he waved his hand in a gesture that signaled for Mark to follow. With a feeling of fear and a pounding heart, Mark followed him. They moved to a table at the back of the room, and the atmosphere grew tense. Mark sat down, trying to keep his cool despite the nerves that were gnawing at him. A few seconds of heavy silence passed before the leader of the group, an older-looking man with graying silver hair, finally spoke. "You gave coffee to someone outside this morning, didn't you?" "A homeless man," he said in a calm voice, but with something firm in every word. Mark nodded, confused. "Yes, I gave him coffee." "Is there anything wrong with that?" he asked, not feeling anything strange about his actions. The man in front of him studied Mark with a meaningful look, then replied in a calm but serious voice, "That small act you did earlier turned out to be more significant than you may have realized. The person you helped turned out to have a relationship with someone very influential." Mark's confusion grew. He frowned as he said, "But it was just a cup of coffee. I don't feel like I did anything out of the ordinary." The man stared at Mark more intently, as if to make sure that the message he was trying to convey was really understood. In a more serious tone, he said, "Sometimes seemingly trivial actions can be the beginning of something very big." Having said that, the man slowly stood up, pulled out a business card, and placed it on the table. "We'll be in touch with you later. Don't worry," he added before leaving the room. Mark stayed where he was, stunned, trying to process what had just happened. His hand reached for the business card the man had left. His eyes widened as he read the name of the company, a large corporation with a worldwide reputation. It had absolutely nothing to do with the small cafe, let alone the homeless shelter where he used to help. He looked at the business card again and thought, "What does a cup of coffee have to do with any of this?" he thought, a feeling of confusion mixed with curiosity continuing to haunt his mind. That night, Mark decided to look into the company that had caught his attention. Sitting at the dining room table with his laptop open, he typed in the name on the business card he had received. The search results immediately led him to interesting information. The company was involved in major investments in the industry and was active in charitable activities that had a positive impact. However, one article immediately caught Mark's attention. The article revealed that the company's CEO, who was once homeless, had come back from the brink through hard work. Mark's heart leapt. Was the homeless man he had given a cup of coffee to yesterday the CEO of a major corporation now in the spotlight? If so, why would the man go to this small coffee shop? What exactly happened? The next day, even though Mark tried to focus on his work, his mind kept wandering to the strange and confusing events of yesterday. Every time the door to the cafe opened, he felt anxious, hoping and worrying that the man would reappear. Finally, his hopes and fears were answered. The door of the cafe opened, and the same man in the suit entered with steady steps. This time he came alone. No one accompanied him. Only a serious aura radiated from his eyes. With sure steps, the man approached the counter where Mark was standing, his gaze sharp but full of meaning. "We want to talk again," the man said in a firm but measured tone. Mark felt his heart pounding again, but he tried to remain calm. "What's this all about?" he asked, even though curiosity almost spilled from his lips. Without saying much, the man took an envelope from his jacket and placed it on the table. The atmosphere was quiet, as if the world had stopped for a moment to make room for this moment. "This is for you," the man said, his voice sounding warmer. "To thank you for what you did yesterday. The person you helped is much more important than you could ever imagine." Mark opened the envelope to find a check in an amount that shocked him. It was enough to pay off all his debts and more. He felt his confusion deepen. Why were they giving him so much money? Wasn't it just a cup of coffee? Days went by quickly, and Mark finally received a call from the corporate office. It turned out that the man he had helped was the CEO of the large corporation. He wanted to meet with Mark in person. The meeting went much differently than Mark had imagined. Mr. Harris, the CEO, sat behind a large desk and invited Mark to sit down. "I have something to offer you," Mr. Harris said with a warm smile. Mark was confused. "I just gave you a cup of coffee," he said, still incredulous. "But you saw me," Mr. Harris replied. "You didn't ignore me. Your little gesture meant a lot, and we appreciate it. That's why I want to offer you the opportunity to join our company." The offer seemed extraordinary to Mark, a chance to start a new life away from his old life of monotonous routines. Mark finally realized that one small act of compassion could change his life forever. A cup of coffee, given out of the heart, had brought him into a world much bigger than he could have imagined. Like this story? Click like to subscribe to more stories, and share your thoughts in the comment section.